I'm reading from Alterwall Objectives, an early science fiction story of mine started, I believe, in 1989. Part 1, and I've added to it since then. Part 1, we're like ants stuck to a table oblivious to higher dimensions we cannot experience, unquote, Diwali. In distant realms of the assembly of universe, quite remote to humans, philosophically minded observers of human affairs express the opinion, in agreement with the ancient philosopher Socrates, ancient to us humans, that the unexamined life isn't worth living. Social creatures living about ant fashion in pursuit of food, energy, and power to have food, energy, and sex, developing a war technology to perpetuate the cycle. The evolution within mathematical criteria conforming to slots of physics available for bio-niches to develop in and temporally flow space-time should require a little philosophic circumspection regarding the purpose of the universe and for life itself. Since the physics are uncertain and are not grounded in an ultimate principle that can be inferred conclusively from the sentient beings contemplating such things, these observers of human affairs believed, they considered a higher ordering of all things, determinate and indeterminate, by God as inevitable, and yet regard the social evolution of mankind as a war between its hive tendencies crawling about its allotted dimensions of faith in the transcendent principle. I see no reason to disagree. The journey. The year brought a series of disastrous earthquakes and volcanic explosions on an apocalyptic scale. The global warming of the world rapidly increased. Oceans of the green planet were evaporating quickly and withering new heat, yet were replenished by glaciers and polar ice caps dwindling in meltdown. Roiling waves heaved and surged under continuous storm cover. The atmosphere was building up alarming levels of sulfur dioxide and other poisonous gases. At last, the predictions of scientists and environmentalists that the ecosystem of the planet was being adversely affected by unfettered human development seemed to be fulfilled, even as the catastrophic transition to the physical environment happened at a pace that puny human efforts of social technology were powerless to reverse. The year was 657,000 before Christ. Yofat and his wife Zubug were frantic, and she was with an unborn child found walking difficult. Yofat said, "The mass driver isn't fully ready to go, yet I will make it work. The laser guide paths and superconductors will accelerate the spaceship to orbital escape velocity. The ground laser may continue to function until the atmosphere becomes so misty that laser light cannot make it to space to burn the spaceship's aft fuel nookie and push it toward the Earth in a sanctuary that might support conditions for humic life." Zubug replied to her husband. He continued making final adjustments on the eco-accelerator financed by grants from Citizens for Alt Lifestyles off-world. "I wish we could take more with us. Just 2 survivors from Venus is a horror. Perhaps if the launch window does not close for a few days, more modules can be built and others will follow." Yofat said, "It is time, woman. Get in. We go." The eco-accelerator rafter increased its velocity to 30,000 miles per hour before losing contact with the electromagnetic accelerator guide field and fled the rapidly deteriorating surface climate conditions of Venus. Eventually, its temperature would rise to 456 degrees. The atmosphere would become dominated by sulfur dioxide, and the population left to history. An automatic laser tracked the craft in order to contact its aft chemical nookie and ignite accelerants. The spaceship soon ran off course as the laser encountered atmospheric interference. The tiny ship was tossed and began moving away from an Earth trajectory and outward toward Neptune, the planet Lila, and the Oort cloud. Yofat and Zubug and their unborn, deep in cold sleep, would not be reawakened from an eccentric trajectory beyond Neptune and a reconfigured low-speed journey to Earth for more than 500,000 years. Change. The outward stage of the orbit eventually reached aphelion, and the ship was drawn back toward the sun. After the rafter reached the inner solar system, it fell into an orbit around the Earth. As the ship's control system thawed out and reanimated the sleepers, the ship directed the construction of a particle beam refractor to collect several gigawatts of sunlight and concentrate it to a usable coordinate to be its power supply for an Earth encasement wave grid field. The entire planet's biota and geophysical composition were determined in the Venusian indeterminacy-based computer. The Earth and the computer's logic unit seemed to be teeming with life. Even hominids, much like Venusian Homo sapiens, were present in numbers exceeding 1 million. The ship computer therefore chose the only unpopulated continent with a temperate climate region for the landing, a land that would one day be named after an early Italian explorer of the coastline of Venezuela and Brazil, Amerigo Vespucci. The normal stealth ship passed invisibly into the atmosphere of the Earth to settle in a natural agricultural clearing along the east foothills of the Andean mountains beyond the glaciers in the 25th century BC. The land, although unpopulated yet by Earth humans, was a wild, raucous environment of living things. The rafter completed its task of bringing Yofat and Zubug to life before beginning the inevitable course of slow dissolution within the corrosive atmospheric elements of the New World. Yofat and Zubug, without clothing, tools, or other articles to make life on Earth easier, awoke in a paradise. Venusians ordinarily lived over 3 centuries. Zubug and Yofat on Earth initially found the environment easier than on their former planet. Their health thrived, and the newborn first Venusian native to the new planet was a happy male child as brilliant as any other child of the home world had ever been. It seemed a contented parent. The aging process seemed to have slowed down, however, and their son Era was slow to mature. After 50 years had passed, Zubug and Yofat had not changed at all, and Era seemed like an adolescent of Venus. They grew tired of their isolated life in Eden as the 24th millennium BC drew near and constructed a boat with ancient Venusian design to raft downstream through the wild country. In time, they discovered the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. Currents took them north to the Antilles Islands and the Florida Strait. Stopping for provisions along the way was hardly necessary, as the sea wildlife was dense. Water for drinking was plentiful in rain showers and ran off a fabric sailcloth into animal skin bucket. Along the Florida Atlantic coast, the Gulf Stream draws near to the shore. The 30-foot Venusian gondola sailing craft that resembled a Viking longship or a Roman galley in some features ran swiftly before a gentle south wind that pushed the boat even farther and farther to sea until at Cape Fear the rafter too turned northeast in the stream and making sail 5 weeks before reaching land at the Aran Islands off a bight of Ireland, today known as Galway Bay. The islands were beautiful, green and uninhabited. Larger land masses to the east indicated the presence of the continent they had sought from memories learned 500,000 years before in researches about the Earth and Venus. This continent was different now. They were aware of the immense passage of time. The course they sought for life and warmth as winter's chill north wind drew nearer took them along the coast into the Pillars of Hercules and the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea. They observed Homo sapiens in many places in the future Europe and Near East, yet engaged none before learning something about the Earth natives. The culture of the people, as they now thought of them, was very primitive, so much so that they seemed to be living as animals in a state of moral ignorance about good and evil. Good and evil, instead of moral concepts, were simply things that happened of 2 characters. Pain was bad and health was good. Health was the condition of having been healed from the frequent injuries and illnesses endemic to the culture. At first contact with the Earth, humans became humans. A virus was given to the Venusians that accelerated the aging process, and eventually in their future children and in the offspring of Era's lifespan would decrease to that of ordinary Earth people. In the new life of Eurasia, Yofat had children by several wives, Zubug had children from several Earthmen, Era had many Earth wives and children. They developed a community of their own that lived upon the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. A proto-civilization existed in the depression that would later be named the Black Sea. Yofat called it Atlantis. As an elder in Atlantis, his tribe that migrated from the east were welcome. He taught much to accelerate the cultural level of Atlantis. Some of Era's children traveled to live in the foothills of mountains dividing Eurasia in the steppe and other places rich with wildlife and away from the magnificent ice sheet. They were to be survivors of the tremendous flood that broke through near the low dividing barrier of land near the city that would later be named Byzantium, founded as Byzantium. Decadent Atlantans, awash with technology, gave no regard to the warnings of Yofat that the land was facing imminent destruction by immersion of many waters. He built a very large wooden ship, filled it with sufficient wildlife to provision for months, and boarded it with most members of his immediate family just before the apocalypse. The ship was driven before the wind and rising sea in time to mountains, then called Urartu for the son of Zubug and Yofat. The couple, now millennia old, began experiencing the onset of aging even in the easier conditions on Earth. They were restless to journey around the rest of the Earth and return to the Andes to leave some sign for any future Venusian travelers that might have survived to reach Earth. The legacy of Yofat, Zubug, and Era and his family left an impression on Earth cultural development that lasted millennia. Following the signs they left in ancient cultures, European travelers followed the glaciers of the northern ice cap back along the west to reach the American continents in the 20th century before Christ. The Irish people, named for Era or I, traversed the world along the 54th degree north latitude, carving spirals as they trekked into rocks to perpetuate the Venusian mystery. The I people crossed over northern Canada and inhabited Wrangell Island in Alaska, north of Ketchikan, before the naming began. They traveled north to the great mountain or Denali and gave it a name of their own, Tenedos, after the island in the eastern Mediterranean that had been their initial home in Eurasia. The name remained in the language of the people that had crossed the land from Asia, and in that of the people that followed in skin boats after the sea level rose, when the Wisconsin Ice Age had ended. The Ai reached Hokkaido and eventually continued intermarriage with Asian peoples. A descendant of the king of the Ainu became the Emperor Ai of the Han Dynasty in the year 2 BC, when the Lord of the Universe arrived in Bethlehem. The lives of Yofat and Zubug would have enduring representation in a pantheon of mythic figures such as the Aztec deity Quetzalcoatl, in the family line of Venus that Julius Caesar claimed descent from, and in other forms such as in the rapidly advancing lap-straight boat building technique that allowed Halfdan the Black to follow ancient maps and rediscover Iceland that had been settled by Albs, then Irish monks, of the far western Christian sect seeking refuge from European persecution. Though the Vikings slaughtered the Irish monks, they learned of the existence of a land farther to the west that they would name Bygd. The Viking colonies at East and West Bygd continued until isolated, starved, and beset perhaps by plague during the end of the Dark Ages, somewhere around the year 1200 Anno Domini. The Albs had already sailed farther west in pursuit of furs and to evade Viking predators aft in space and time. The Venusian bloodline had merged into oblivion of the 99,900 human genome, yet the ancestral influences remained.